All right, we're about to begin Chapter 6. In the standard level book, in the HL book, it's Chapter 4. So whenever you see the S, that stands for the standard level book. Whenever you see the H, that stands for the higher level book. So the first section is standard level book, Chapter 6, Lesson A. So they talk about functional relationships and statistical relationships. Functional relationships exist when there's variables that are used in a formula, and all the data must lie on the line of the curve. Now, statistical relationships are when there's no direct relationship. Data is plotted and has a tendency to be close to a curve. So statistical relationships happen when you have an experiment. So when you're dealing with modeling relationships, you could have linear correlations, nonlinear correlations, perfect linear correlations, perfect nonlinear correlations, and that's pretty much all you need to know for Section 6A. And if you need to press pause, please do so to take time to do your notes. Okay, Section 6B. We're going to talk about qualitative, quantitative types of research and calculating the Pearson correlation coefficient, and they use the variable lowercase r for this. So when data collected appears to be in a correlation, it does not necessarily mean that one variable causes the other. Correlation does not imply causation. So we use correlation to help see if there's a cause, but we can't necessarily, we don't necessarily know that for sure. Qualitative research is based on free-form data like diaries, open-ended questions, how do you feel kinds of questions. Quantitative research is gathered from a numerical form. For example, an interview question with closed questions like yes or no questions, or a rating scale, how do you feel 1 through 10. And when you use this rating scale, you create quantitative research data to collect your information. Now, if you have an R value of -1, then you've got a perfect correlation that is going down. When you have 0, that means your data is all over the place, there is no correlation, and if you have an R equals 1, you've got a perfect positive correlation. So if I was to go back at the previous example, this right here would have an R value of 1 because it's perfect, it's a perfect correlation. So that would have an R value of +1 because it's going up. Okay, so in your assignment, they're going to ask you to calculate the R value. Now, I suggest you download this table. It's in your assignment. So here's an example what R equals 1 would look like for perfect. Here's an example of very strong, strong, moderate. You can see how as R gets closer to 0, the values kind of get scattered all over the place. And here's other examples of negative correlation. Please print this and put it in your notebook or your spiral notebook. Now let's do an example, calculating R. So this also is something you can download, and we're going to do this together. Okay, so they've given you some data, which you will have in your assignment, and we need to plot this on your calculator. So step 1, you get your calculator, and I'm going to hit Stat, and then 1, and then Enter. So if I just hit the Stat button right here below Del. I hit 1, I hit Enter, and now I've got some data here that I might want to clear. You can go all the way up to you can go all the way up to here. Now do not hit delete because that deletes the column and then it's a pain to get it back. So you go up here and you hit clear, and then you hit enter, and that just clears the data. Do not hit delete. You go up here, you hit clear, enter, and that deletes the data. Do not hit delete though up here because then you'll delete the column. Okay, so let's enter the data. 20, 25, 28, enter, oops, 30, 32, 37, 42, 48. Okay, let's enter the Y values. So I arrow to the right, and now I'm going to hit 24, 20, 22, 21, 25, 28, 30, 32. Okay, so I've just entered my data. Okay, so here I've entered the Y values. Okay, now I'm going to hit second in stat plot, so hit the second button and stat, no, second and the Y equals gets me to this screen. Okay, so, and then I hit enter, and then it takes me here. And if I want to see the plots, I have to hit on here. So I have enter, and that turns stats plots on. And if down here, if it doesn't have L1 and L2, since I enter the data in L1 and L2, I need to have it say that. So how do I get L1 and L2? You hit the second button, and then 1, and that gets me L1. If I want L2, I hit the second and 2 to get me L2. Oops, I don't want that there. I'm going to delete that. So second, and then the number gets you the L1, L2 there. Okay? Next. And then we hit enter. Okay. By the way, these are really good instructions. I recommend you print this and put it in your 3-ring binder. Okay, so now I'm going to hit zoom, which is up here, and I'm going to hit 9 for stat. So I have to arrow down to get to number 9. Zoom stat. I hit enter, and that's what my data looks like. Okay, and you can see that's what they have there. It looks the same. Okay, this doesn't work. This is if you have a newer calculator. So let's move on to the next step. So I have to hit stat, and then I hit the arrow over till I say see calc, and now I'm going to choose 4 for linear regression, and then we want L1 and L2. So I could simply just hit enter to get the R values, because it chooses L1 and L2 by default, but you could simply do second 1 to get L1, and then the comma, which is right above the 7, and then second 2 to get L2, and then you hit enter, and then that gets me the R value of 0.864. And if I look at my table from over here, 0.864 gives me 0.8 is a moderate positive correlation, because 0.86 is in between 0.7 and 0.87. So this would give me a moderate positive correlation with this R value. Please copy these notes carefully and print up these 2 worksheets. The correlation coefficient reference table, super important to print up, and these calculator instructions, super important, because you will need these when we start studying in April and May for the IB test.